Welcome back to the imaginary gallery, the gay world of narcissism. Tonight is a story, a true story, which illustrates just how the cluster B monsters can create and or contribute to wreaking havoc in others' lives, involving control, manipulation, and many of the cluster B traits that we've spoken about. So the story begins. I had been going to a particular hairdresser for quite a while. This hairdresser tended to switch from shop to shop, which I loyally followed. Some places were closer than others, some were further away, but they were all pretty close. This hairdresser was great. This hairdresser knew all the scoop on any and everybody, so I could always be entertained while getting my locks clipped off. Well, at one particular salon, I recall looking across the room and seeing what actually turned out to be the owner of the salon, who looked really nice, was kind of my type, which was shorter, muscular, cute. So I would get my hair cut and notice across the room the other person and kind of like asked questions of, so who's that, or what do you know about that? And I learned that this person, who looked nice, in nice shape, was actually a little bit older than I was, which I was surprised by. But I heard the scoop that this was like a late 40s guy who had a lover that was like ancient, like really old, which made me think of the stereotypes we see with like a 16-year-old kid with a 40-year-old date and thinking, sugar daddy? It was just kind of strange to hear, because he looked really cute, and I'd sometimes talk to him just here and there. But I had my hairdresser, so I just kind of like kept that off to the side of, well, there's a cute person there, but whatever. And I wasn't chasing after anybody at that point. Well, the hairdresser I went to eventually moved to a new place, and I followed along there and continued to get haircuts. Well, then the tragic news came, eventually, after a few years, that this hairdresser was moving out of state, far out of state. So I thought, oh great, now I've finally found somebody I'm comfortable with, and you're moving out of state. Well, good luck to you, but what am I to do? So I suggested, I said, hey, why don't you give me some referrals? Because this hairdresser, you know your hairdresser, you tell them every little detail you want, and you figure they know your head through and through, and then for them to just disappear, you're like starting back at zero. So you're like, well, refer me to somebody who's got the similar techniques that you do or something? Well, the guy gave me a few names, but I was a little curious, thinking back about that other salon, thinking, that cute hairdresser's there. I know. I'll make an appointment. And I did. I made an appointment with the cute hairdresser that had the elderly partner, and I didn't completely understand that. It's just, okay, I don't know, but I went ahead and did it. So I scheduled the appointment, got the hair cut, got the hair color, and it was great. And shortly after, became his friend on Facebook. And after the first session, kind of sent messages and, flattery type stuff like, oh, you're a cute hairdresser, and I got stuff back like, oh, you're a cute this, that, and I thought, oh, great. But at the same time, I knew that this cute hairdresser lived with a grandpa, and it's just not something I've ever considered, like living with an elderly person who's supposed to be my partner and whatever else. It just was not something that was my scene, nothing I'd ever considered doing. But I kind of asked questions because I figured you can't be happy with an elderly person. But at the same time, knowing what I've gone through, I didn't want to tempt some person to come my direction. So I kind of just was curious, because he'd be saying flirtatious stuff like, oh yeah, you're a darling, and I'd be like, okay, and I'd say, so do you ever go out? And the response was something like, whenever I can, yes. And so I was kind of trying to set up something, but at the same time thinking, wait a second, this goes against what I just ran away from. So I was kind of in the middle and figured, well, if anything, it's just a hairdresser, cutting the hair. The other stuff is to be thought about. Well, I continued going, month after month, and eventually the elderly lover / partner became deceased. And again, I didn't know at all how to feel about any of this, because I know we've got this 40-something guy who looks like he's in his 30s or 20s, who's running around when he can, but still has this person at home. And again, I can't really relate to that because I've never been in that kind of situation. But I continued flirtatious behavior. Not too forward because I was kind of scared, but at the same time, whatever, you know how it is. Lust. It controls us. But I would flirt and be friendly and give compliments and so on. Well, it wasn't long before I was getting these haircuts regularly and colors. This ain't natural. This is a wig. I started noticing this younger kid, dopey looking kid hanging around the salon and sitting at the desk and wondering who's that? And it turns out, and this person had been around even before the partner became deceased, but I just kept noticing it, what's this trashy thing doing here? Turns out that was his latest trick. So basically he had the elderly dying person at home while he was pursuing this young, dumb trick. And I didn't know how to take it all, because I can't really judge others because I'm not in their situation. But at the same time, I was just like, okay, well, you're seeing that, but you've got this dying person at home and whatever. But again, I didn't really judge. But this person was around the salon regularly, and the flirtation back and forth kind of like waned because I didn't really push forward. The hairdresser didn't really like say, I want to see you tonight or anything. And plus, it was like something to step back from because of all the circumstances involved. I didn't want to be the other woman with anybody. So, eventually, though, he announced, oh yeah, that's my boyfriend. That's my new boyfriend. And I thought, great. And just looking at the person, I've got this intuitive sense, which tells me certain things. Maybe it's a spirit guide, maybe it's just intuition, or both, but whether I was going to pursue or not pursue the hairdresser, I could just see trouble. I could tell this kid was some kind of trouble. And it seemed kind of strange. He'd come into the salon and sit at the desk and not work there, but just sit. And to me, it made me think of control. He wants his young kid to be under his nose because he's in his late 40s and this kid's probably in his 20s. And he doesn't want this kid running around. So I figured I can kind of understand that, but it kind of reminded me of old times, thinking I would never want to live that way. But regardless, they were an item. So I kind of like backed off any of the flirtatious stuff because I figured, you know what, if he's got somebody he's happy with, great. Kind of like a reversal. Now he's the older one and the other one's the younger one, kind of like switching places from what he just exited from. But anyway, this went on for a while, and again, I'm just there for business, just there for a haircut. I gave nice tips, and so on. Well, eventually, one day I was looking at Facebook, and I happened to notice that it was the very day this hairdresser planned to go on some kind of trip out of the country to some Bahama-type vacation out of the country, Mexico, or somewhere else away from USA. And I couldn't help but notice his posting. It said something like, I'm single again. Great. Or something like that. And you could think, oh, wow, I'm going to be excited. He's single again. But at the same time, he sounded like he was suffering in some way. So it's like I'm not going to benefit off somebody suffering, but I was curious to know what the deal was. And on his Facebook posts, friends of his would make comments like, oh, you deserve better than that trash. Oh, you can do better than that. I'm so sorry it worked. I'm so sorry it turned out this way. You can do better. He's worthless, blah, blah, blah. Which, of course, I agreed with. A few weeks later, when it was time for the haircut, I had said, so, what's the deal? What happened? You're dating that kid? And I used to make little comments here and there about like, what's that fool doing here? What's he doing here? He doesn't belong here. Well, at this point, it was like all worth it. The intuition was accurate because the hairdresser said something like, oh, he's been living with me and it's over. And I thought, well, what do you mean? And of course, this was right about the time I had started YouTube videos on Cluster B monsters. So I was like eating up this story because it like fit right in. And he told me the story about how they lived together and how the boy was drinking liquor and drunk and how one night he had come into the room seeing the lover kid passed out with his phone in his hand. So he conveniently picked the phone up and looked in it. And what did he see? Keep in mind, this is his lover. Well, the lover's phone had suggestive text messages, nude pictures of himself being sent to another guy. So he was furious, thinking, okay, I'm letting you live in my house, we're together, and you're drinking liquor and flirting with whoever and sending your naked pictures, and what's going on? So he got rid of him. He kicked the kid out. And he told me the story, and I thought, well, that's the right thing to do. That kid's just using you. So he was like heartbroken and hurt, but at the same time glad, I thought, to get rid of this creature, because we know people like that do not change. They will move into your house gladly, tell you how they love you, and then when you're not looking, flirt with somebody else and send naked pictures to them, and then pass out, evidently, which I guess screwed up the situation. But as I listened to the story, I couldn't help but pull in pieces of my past and experiences I've had with other similar acting fools, and I was kind of like saying, well, I knew there was something wrong with that kid. And I'd say stuff like, so, are you going to let him back in? It's like, no, I'm through with him. And then he told a story about how he told this guy, look, you're going to flirt with that guy? Well, you can move in with him. I'll move you there. I'll drop you off. So evidently he took the kid to the other person's place and deposited him off. Well, then the story I heard later was that the person he deposited him off with kicked him out, which furthered my impression this guy's trouble. He sends him off to the other person, that person kicks him out. So I thought, well, I kind of felt like a small victory, thinking, well, I called that one. It's not really my place, but at the same time, I was just thinking, my intuition's working. I could tell that was trouble. I came back and would question, like the next month later, like, so what's the deal? I'm single. But then at the same time, I wasn't getting any types of requests for a date, and nor did I dare. I was kind of like stepping back from it all, but still fantasizing about how beautiful the hairdresser was, but realized this is a lot going on here. I don't know if I want to get involved with such things. Well, though, several weeks, months passed by, and I once again found myself in the hairdresser chair and brought up, so, you're not talking to that kid anymore, are you? And terribly disappointed, I was told, oh yeah, we got back together. Well, that was shocking news, because, as we all know, people like that, as I said before, do not change. So I just thought, oh, please tell me you're not telling the truth. But evidently he was, and they were back together. Well, at this point I became a little angry, and I got my hair cut and went home. Well, several nights later I was browsing through the web, including Facebook, and I kind of became naughty, which I've done before. It's not beyond me to be naughty. Plus there was anger and stuff I didn't know how to deal with, so I went on to the hairdresser's Facebook page, and I posted something on there, which kind of mirrored the types of things I saw when the initial breakup occurred, when others were saying, you can do better than that, he's filthy. Well, I just ignored the fact that there were new, recent pictures of the two of them together here or there, and I went on and just said, I'm so glad you got rid of that trash. He was no good for you. He was just using ya, and whatever else. And I posted all this, treating it as if the reuniting never happened. And I think a few days later, I got a message saying, you better stop. And I thought, oh, maybe that was too much. But it was just the anger of knowing how, from what I heard already, this person, this kid, is not going to snap into shape. It's just a matter of time before it screws up again. Regardless, it's not my place. I just kept getting haircuts and so on. Well, it kind of bothered me, though, to think, because this person's older than I am, and normally I would think that I could, like, give advice to a younger kid, but this was my senior, so I'm like, I'm not in a position to give advice to an older person. But my whole thought was, people like that do not change. They will continue. It's just a matter of time. Anyway, I one night sent another message saying, "Are you still with that fool?" I was just playing, and I said something like, "Tell me he's gone or someone's going to get hurt." Because I was kind of like trying to defend, like, you deserve to be defended against such filth. But regardless, I didn't get any kind of response, so I went ahead and just kept getting haircuts. Well, here's where the turning point occurred. I went back again for a haircut and color and whatever else, and I had mentioned, "Are you still with that fool?" And then the answer was yes. And I would kind of talk mean about it, which probably wasn't too polite, but at the same time, I'm going by the stories he told me already that painted this other kid as a monster. And then I had an appointment scheduled for the following month, and this is when things became strange. I showed up for the haircut as scheduled, sat in the waiting room, and he got done with his client, because he typically would have like two at a time. One's getting their hair processed while the other one's getting it cut, and so on. And he said something very strange to me, which didn't really register at the time. He said something like, "I need to get your email address." And I thought, email address? And I also happened to notice that normally before my appointment, I would get an email that confirmed it, but this particular time I didn't have one, but luckily my trusty phone had it in there. But he was talking about my email address, and I thought, oh, it's the same I've always had. So he went ahead and did the haircut, the color, whatever, and then I left. Well, when I got home, I went through my emails, and oh my goodness. After the previous appointment, where I'd scheduled the next appointment, there was an email, and I get thousands of emails. I have several email accounts, and it's ridiculous. I don't have time to sit there and look through all the crap. But I happened to notice at this point, it appeared to be, he sent a message saying, "I'm sorry, I will not be able to do your hair anymore. I've canceled your appointment for whatever date, and you'll need to find another hairdresser to do your hair in the future." And my first thought was, this is a scam. Hairdressers don't turn away clients, especially ones like me, who at least I always gave like a big tip every time. I thought, this seems fishy. So I started thinking about my cluster B experience and figured, you know what? I bet that kid saw my Facebook posting and decided I was targeted as the enemy. So I figured the kid got into the older guy's stuff and like sent that message. And the stuff about the email, now I realize, was he had sent the message, and clearly I didn't read it because I didn't, and here I was for my appointment, and he had made it, so that kind of sent a mixed signal, because that makes it seem like maybe he was in on it. And then I couldn't help but picture, maybe this kid told him, "Look, you will stop cutting his hair then, he's a threat to us," is what I figure. I don't even know if it's true, but it just seemed like the kind of thing that would happen, because here the older one's saying, "Look, you're going to shape up," and so the kid's going to like, well, then you got to get rid of that client that thinks I'm horrible. And I think, look, my thoughts were, though, this is business. I get a haircut, I pay money, I give a tip. Who cares what they're doing personally? Who cares what I think personally based on my information I've been given by the hairdresser himself? But it just didn't sit right. I didn't believe necessarily that the hairdresser was really ejecting me from his services, because I've never had that, ever. Never gone to a business where I was refused service. But most hairdressers, if I drive them crazy, like at one I used to go to that didn't believe in heat, an Aveda salon, I'd loudly say, "Where's the heater? This isn't drying fast enough." And the hairdresser would be like, "Shh, be quiet." But he wasn't going to eject me from his services. He just thought I was a little embarrassing because I thought heat's not that bad, because at his other salons he used heat. But never had been ejected. So I was like kind of shocked, and plus I needed a haircut. And so I kind of sent some messages back and forth saying, look, whoever this is, do not try to interfere in his business because I'm his client and whatever. Well, I kept getting messages back that sounded like they were from the actual hairdresser. And then I looked through my phone, which I recalled back from those early days of flirtation. I actually had his phone number that was personal. So I texted him and said something to him, and he texted right back, who is this? And I responded, and when he figured it out, it's like, how did you get my number? I never gave this to you, and blah, blah, blah. I thought, yes, you did. Remember in the beginning when we flirted, and I thought maybe we could date? But I started to think either this kid's infiltrating his phone too, or I just need to accept the fact that this kid obviously is controlling. And then he said something. He said, you've threatened my boyfriend, and I can't have you in the salon, and la la la. And I thought, threatened? I've never even spoken to your boyfriend. But regardless, when you deal with it this much, you have to like get to a point where you're like, okay, stop. But I just thought about the whole thing and how it sounds like control. It sounds like the kid's controlling him, he's controlling the kid, and it just was an ugly situation. But the point of all this story is just to let you know how things can happen that can interfere in your daily life based on gay dating stuff and flirtations and so on. But it was a strange experience. Again, I've never gone through before. Never heard of a business person turning away money, but regardless, as far as I know, they're happily ever after and living together forever until the next sickness occurs. But it's kind of sad, it's kind of a shame, but people do what they choose to do, and I'm just an innocent bystander. Plus, I found a new hairdresser.
I am the narcopath, and I am being held here against my will. And to get out, I've been told I've got to give you another confession. I don't like doing it, but if it means my freedom so I can get another target, I'm all for it.
So the word on the street is that you've been telling people that I used you. And you want me, I suppose, now to tell you how exactly I used you? How did I use thee? Let me count the ways.
Well, way number one I used you was, remember the first night you took me out and you said you had to stop by your place and apologize like it would be some kind of inconvenience? I was counting on it and hoping on it because that allowed me to start my assessment right off the bat. Well, number one was real estate. Empty real estate aside from you. You see, I'd been living with my whore roommate who had crackheads spending the night on our porch every night, and I couldn't get a beauty night's sleep. So when I saw that you had your own place and it was big enough for me and my things, that scored you points. A lot of points.
I made sure to tell you at any opportunity just how horrible life was with my whore roommate. And I was hoping you'd get the hint and eventually ask me to stay with you. Well, when that didn't happen, so I called you that night in a fit of tears about how I just didn't know what I was gonna do. I can't stay here one more night with these awful roommates. And you took the bait and you asked me to stay with you is that you have a sweet nature which allowed number 1 and 2 to occur.